Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 9. Monday Night Football. Can't even remember what happened in that particular game, but that's how things go when everything blends together for all of us around these parts. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. Payne, it came back to me.
Giants.
It was Giants Steelers in a game that exceeded odds makers' expectations with a point total, and unfortunately for the Giants, Tyrone Tracy potentially sidelined with a concussion. But I digress.
That game was frustrating for me because models spit out over. You and I talked about it. And the reason we never got there is some of the red zone efficiency. And sure enough, to start that game, both teams are just moving the ball up and down the field, and it becomes an EPL match, and you're feeling good. Like, stayed off this disaster. And then eventually it started turning into touchdowns, and that thing flew over. So, left some money out there to end last week.
Well, quickly you find out you can avoid red zone efficiency if you're not actually in the red zone.
That's
and you're
true.
Busting off explosives like we saw in the second half. And that game opened up, Giants coming up just short on the wrong side of a 26-18 decision for a game that closed at 6. But enough in the rear view mirror. We start to look forward to a busy week 9 and an interesting matchup on the docket for Thursday Night Football. Plenty of the Jets fans that may hear this may want to avert their ears as they know their season is quickly swirling into a level of irrelevance they didn't anticipate coming into the year. But that hasn't stopped odds makers from making the Jets a 2.5 point favorite, as low as 1.5 in some spots right now for the date against the Houston Texans. Total in this contest, 42.5. The Jets, meanwhile, trying to make a little bit of history, looking to become the 4th team in the league to make the playoffs after starting a season 2-6. The more remarkable part about the Jets being 2-6 this season, they've been favored by an average of 2.6 points per game. They're the only team in the last 40 years with that many losses despite being favored by that many points on average through 8 games, joining the 2006 Pittsburgh Steelers. That just happened to be Bill Cowher's final year at the helm before Mike Tomlin took over. Meanwhile, on the other side for the Houston Texans, they came to MetLife last year, lost 30-6 in a game you and I watched in lovely Danbury, Connecticut, with a little bit of the elements in play. C.J. Stroud struggled mightily in that particular contest, but this Houston Texans team has rebounded and done so with a vengeance so far this season. Big storyline in this game, Payne, is injuries. The Jets dealing with a rash of them on their side, mainly in the defensive backfield, but the most notable for fantasy managers and those folks who love offense, the Houston Texans receiving room loses another key cog. Stephon Diggs done for the season with a torn ACL. Nico Collins still not able to return from IR until next week. When you assess this particular matchup, the Jets have underachieved. The Houston Texans, the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think a lot of people will scratch their head when they see this number, but the betting market is the ultimate indicator of efficiency, and we've already seen money come in on the Jets when this game opened at a pick'em.
Well said. And there were some random +1 out there, and there was bigger positions.
A smattering.
Yeah, there was some bigger positions taken at pick and -1 and money line -15, 17, 18, in that range. And it's easy because of the wow factor, right? Everyone wants to talk Rodgers and Adams and Wilson and Brees. And I think the Jets offense has been pretty solid in recent weeks. If you're looking at yards per play data, the Texans don't allow a ton of passes, but when they do, they're impactful. They're explosive. We mentioned that a couple of weeks ago in our breakdown of a Texans game. It's actually the other side of the ball that to me is the biggest key. And I think you mentioned some of the injuries on that part of the matchup, right? Jets defense, Texans offense. And I think we've been at the forefront on the Jets defense not being nearly as good as its reputation and perception. And I think that's important to mention and keep fair here. But like, I do think Robert Salah has been missed some defensively. However, I look at this and I say to myself, like, the Texans offense has been really struggling. I know they're winning some of these games, but it has not been pretty. And it's not just Nico Down, who you mentioned, but it's Stephon Diggs as well. And if you start with week 5 against the Bills and you go from the start of that second half to the current moment we're sitting here before this game kicks off this evening, the Texans offense 23rd in EPA per play with a rushing success rate below 30%. And yes, the Jets defense is down CJ Mosley and Tony Adams, but it's a healthier defense at corner, right? DJ Reed returned last week opposite Sauce Gardner, only allowed 4.8 yards per target on the season. Michael Carter returned to his slot role last week, allowed 1 catch for 1 yard. So that combination is a really good get back. CJ Mosley obviously is missed, but if you look at some of these defensive players, Quincy Williams and Jamian Sherwood have both been fantastic, and they'll be on the field more. They're 2 of the Jets' better graded linebackers. And maybe a little under the radar here, Todd, is the Jets' defense has faced the big boy version of this offense in week 1. You get a Kyle Shanahan disciple with outside zone runs and many of the same passing concepts the Texans' offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick uses that you saw against the 49ers already. So this is an offense the Jets have seen already effectively. They've seen live bullets against it, and I think that helps in any week, but even more so on a short week when you're already kind of cramming for preparation. The Jets faced this Texan offense last year and really kept Stroud in check when most of his weapons were healthy. And then I think about what the Texans have done a little bit more offensively now that you have these injuries to the receiver group. They use a little bit more of a heavier set personnel grouping, specifically 12. And the Jets defense has actually been better against 12. Bobby Slowick, we know we've talked about, has a propensity to waste second downs trying to run. I don't know if that's going to be overly helpful in this scenario. I think the Jets can allocate more guys to the box like other defenses have because Nico isn't really threatening downfield. The Jets got Hassan Reddick back last week, only played 26 snaps, but it's a nice addition to the Jets defensive line to pair with Will McDonald in known passing situations. The Texans offensive line has been a sieve in protection. Just look the last 3 weeks, CJ Stroud has been under duress constantly. So without that aforementioned downfield threat there in Nico taking the top off, like we've seen defenses feel more comfortable being aggressive. The Texans allowed the Colts to get a 45% pressure rate on dropbacks last week. The week before, Green Bay pressured Stroud on 52% of dropbacks. Prior to that, the Patriots, who can't spell pressure, 33% pressure rate, right? Those 3 defenses currently ranked 20th, 23rd, and 30th in pass rush win rate. A big step up in class here against the Jets defense, top 5 in that category. So these defenses have just gotten to Stroud in waves recently, and they're not really high-pressure outfits through 8 weeks. So I think the Jets' defense can look competent tonight here, Todd.
What's kind of been your overall assessment for Bobby Slowick? We know he was one of the hottest names on the coaching cycle last year. I have to imagine he'll get plenty of interviews this offseason as well. Does he take the responsibility, and should he be forced to shoulder the burden for some of the issues that the Texans have had, whether it's in pass protection? We mentioned the injuries, and it's something that every NFL team deals with, but his unwillingness to adjust and try and figure things out. To your point, you watch this Texans team, and while they're winning games, they're not doing it with beauty or style points by any stretch in CJ Stroud's sophomore season.
So I think we had the conversation coming into the year where he's a young offensive mind. He's only going to continue to grow. But there are game plans that are clearly better than others, and you never know when they're going to arrive, right? We saw it last year towards the very end of the season where, you're in a big game during the regular season against the Colts. The clear path is throwing the ball downfield, and it's this run-heavy game that almost has them getting upset by the Colts. And then the very next week, they go out and they face the Browns, and they employ the right strategy, and they just tear the Browns up in the playoffs. And you're like, who is this guy? It just is, it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, basically, from week to week. You never know what guy you're getting. This season, it's a little bit different, right? I don't know why the names up front are not showing well in pass protection. The money that's been allocated to the Texans front has been substantial. You'd expect some better performances there. You have Joe Mixon, which has been a blessing in disguise because he has exceeded every expectation someone could have.
Never expected, by the way, that to work. I thought that was a luxury more than anything else, and someone they could plug in and get a little bit of utility. Not seeing the dynamic in play as we have with the Texans, him becoming their most valuable weapon, given what's gone on.
And he is again tonight, right? Because, yes, I mentioned the Jets being better against 12 formation, but you got to be able to run the ball in the Jets. And so, Mixon will be the key factor again tonight like he was last week. But then you have the twofold, right? Some of the metrics that C.J. Stroud had last year were just so off the charts good, it'd be difficult to replicate those. And then again, at the same time, you're figuring out how to implement all of these weapons. Nico is the mainstay. Nico is the guy, right? He's the straw that stirs the drink. Bringing in Stephon Diggs was a luxury, I think. And it was taking Tank Dell off the field in some situations when Nico was healthy. But now, you're having some injury issues there. So I don't think it's all on Bobby Slowick. But there's certainly some issues. I mean, I think we highlighted, right? At one point, and I believe it's still true. I don't have the metrics off the top of my head. But like 2-3 weeks ago, we talked about the Texans game and how this was the guy who had the highest run rate on second and long situations. I mean, you have the luxury of C.J. Stroud, and at the time, Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. Like, how could that be conceivable? And so he was effectively wasting downs. It was like a CFL offense where basically they were playing with 2 downs because he kept running on second and a mile. So those are the things
somewhere out there, Matt Canada is extremely excited about that potential of running into 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11 situations.
And so those are the things in Bobby Slowick's game that need to be cleaned up. But he's a young guy, so like you're buying the fact that we've seen the flashes, and he's going to continue to grow and develop. So I certainly wouldn't hire him as an NFL head coach at this point, right? It just seems still too new. But yeah, I mean, if they continue winning games, he'll certainly get looks.
Always an interesting dynamic in play, and Houston has the luxury after playing tonight of, not playing until Sunday Night Football, so a little bit of extra rest. I'll be in the same day in a marquee matchup next week against the Detroit Lions. Speaking of NFC teams trying to regain their swagger or assert some level of dominance, the Dallas Cowboys on the road, short week of sorts against the Atlanta Falcons, and we're seeing Falcon money start to enter the market here on a Thursday with Atlanta out to 3 at a lot of prominent national shops. There are some juice 2.5s as well at some of your bigger offshore books. This total has taken a one-way traffic since it opened early this week. We're now out to 52. Cowboys, worst 7-game start to a season since 2020 when they started 2-7. They were saddled with their first road loss of the season last week at San Francisco, but this is still a team 3-1 on the road, allowing less than 20 points per game compared to the ghastly numbers that they've surrendered when they're playing in their own building. Unfortunately for the Falcons and Falcons fans, Atlanta can't play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense every week. They've gone 2-0 against the Bucs, scoring an average of 33.5 points per game. Against the rest of the league, Atlanta 3-3, averaging 21.2 points per game. However, it can't and shouldn't detract from the fact that Atlanta has now launched their best 8-game start of 5-3 to a season since 2016. Why is that year important? They went on to lose to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. The Cowboys, Payne, dealing with some injuries defensively. We're still not sure if Micah Parsons will be back this week. Trayvon Diggs was a DNP on Wednesday. The Cowboys are calling it a calf issue. We know they've been without Kalen Carson. Offensively, the Cowboys can't run the football. But they may not have to run the football this week against the Falcons because you don't really need balance against a Falcons team that can't generate a pressure to save their lives. But on the flip side of things, Atlanta offensively, we knew that more Kirk Cousins had time in this system and time to operate behind that offensive line was going to turn all of the playmakers and the wealth of riches Atlanta had into some big game players. And we're seeing flashes of that with Bijan Robinson. Kyle Pitts starting to perform at levels we haven't seen during his career. And Drake London has been the common denominator, although he had one of his least productive games, at least on the stat sheet last week against the Buccaneers. This is a Cowboys team that needs a win like blood. Atlanta would love nothing more than to continue building a little bit of separation in the NFC South that suddenly has become a one-horse race with the Bucs dealing with injuries, the Saints beaten up with injuries, and the Carolina Panthers, well, being the Carolina Panthers. But I guess we should start with the number here because this has been a full-blown, unadulterated battle every time we get to 3.
Yeah, I think that is well said. And you're having the numbers guys get out there and lay it under 3, and you're having a different faction say, hey, at +3 here, how is this humanly possible? And that's effectively what you're getting. The one agreement we've had on this in terms of prices is the total. Boy, pressure, and that's key for both sides, and the lack of pressure has created one-way action on the total from the minute this market opened Sunday night. And so that's what we're seeing here. At least market-wise. As I look at this, the Cowboys can't run the ball for as much as they try. They're 30th in efficiency. Sounds like Dowdle will be back. But Dak has the 3rd highest dropback rate in the NFL. The Falcons are 25th in pass rush win rate, 29th in actual pressure created, and dead last in sack rate at 2%. So, at least from Dak's perspective, quarterbacks being comfortable is literally what's killing the Falcons defense, because you can see a massive delta in the coverage data, which indicates that Atlanta's been extremely sticky. But in this league, like if you don't make the quarterback uncomfortable, it's curtains. And so the amount of separation the Atlanta secondary has allowed is one of the top marks in the league. They're not allowing a ton yet. As a unit, they're allowing a league-high completion rate over 72% just because the pressure is non-existent. The Cowboys' offense is certainly stepping down in class here, and so that's appealing at 3 to some bettors. You just go through the schedule, right? They face the home Browns defense when healthy, face the Saints defense at their healthiest, Ravens defense when they were healthiest, Steelers and 49ers defenses. Now you get Atlanta. Indoors on a fast surface, which is what the Cowboys prefer since it's similar to their home environment. And it's a similar situation on the other side, right? Kirk Cousins has made, much to people's chagrin, gigantic gobs of money torching defenses when he's comfortable. There are few quarterbacks better than Cousins when playing in a controlled environment. And without Parsons, who did not practice again on Wednesday, something to continue to monitor, and Dexter Lawrence still on IR, and Sam Williams out for the season, Dallas is 26th in pass rush win rate, and that incorporates games where Parsons has been on the field. It's substantially worse without. Trayvon Diggs, you mentioned, missed practice on Wednesday with the calf injury. The Deron Bland situation is becoming like a game of, fucking Matlock here. Like, go back to week 6. Stephen Jones does it.
They said he was ready to go then.
Does a radio interview that I'm listening to, and he says Deron Bland will contribute something this week. He'll be back. That week, Deron Bland practiced in full on both Wednesday and Thursday. So I get the feeling there was a setback because he did not practice that Friday leading into week 6. Bland has not played a game at all. He was removed from the IR list this week. It's opening up his 21-day window. He did not practice Wednesday. Today is the big day for that trio. If there is a situation where Diggs is out and Bland isn't ready and Parsons also doesn't go, Cousins is going to have one of the friendliest environments of any quarterback this season, right? There's no pressure. It's a secondary in Dallas that's dead last in stickiness. They allow guys to create separation at the highest rate. And when you combine that with a unit that allows over 9 yards per pass attempt when they don't get pressure, Cousins is going to feel really comfortable here. He has a 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio when kept clean. Dallas also can't stop the run, so Cousins should have a complimentary ground game with Bijan Robinson. Again, indoors, fast track. I think we'll have to keep our eye on the injury report, but this has been more matchup, situation, injury-driven than price. Like, our model doesn't get the 52 here, which has kept us off the over, but other respected groups have been hitting this constantly. And even though the model at this point showing value to the under, you couldn't pay me to be on the under. So let's see where this goes from now until Sunday. It'll be very much injury report predicated, and today is one of those key days.
Given the way we've seen the market move and all of the Cowboys' key defenders being out, at least in practice on Wednesday, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything else, but suffice to say that 52 feels like the ceiling, and if any of these guys get upgraded, you'd see at least a nibble from underbetters.
Yeah. I mean, it's the market, right? The minute if Parsons is at practice Thursday, right? Some local beat writer is at practice, tweets it out. Yeah, Deron Bland, Diggs, and Parsons return to practice. Yeah, the market is going to feel an impact, and 52 is not going to be available.
That would make sense.
Now, it's a version of Parsons that has not played in over a month, right? It's
True.
A version of
You're
Deron Bland that hasn't played in 18 fucking months. And it's probably less than 100% Diggs. And so the mental gymnastics becomes at that point is like, if this gets back to 50 somehow, right, below the key of 51, how healthy are these guys, right? And that becomes the conversation. So it's constantly, price versus information. And that's the ultimate gymnastics of what we do.
Well, because you are a consummate pro, it allows us the segue to another game where price, injury availability, and the status of some marquee players will have an impact on the betting market before we get to kick off in a late game on Sunday with the Seahawks and the Rams doing battle in the NFC West. This game, we saw on the look-ahead number, the Seahawks as much as a 3-point favorite in this particular spot. The Seahawks stubbed their toe and then some against the Buffalo Bills, a 3-point home underdog. All of America sees the Rams take care of business as a 2.5, 3-point dog against the Vikings. And lo and behold, it is the Rams, a modest 1.5 point favorite for their annual trip to the Pacific Northwest. Total on this game, 48. There are a smattering of 48.5s out there as well. Seahawks come into this contest with off their fewest points in a game, 10, and the largest loss of the season, 21, against the Bills. This is a Seahawks team who can't run the ball a lick and wants to chuck it around at one of the highest pass rates in the entire league. They're 29th in the league as far as rushing yards themselves, 89.3, and 29th in opponent rushing yards, giving up nearly 150 a game. Meanwhile, for the Rams, this is a team that's compiled a 7-3 record over the last two seasons when Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua all play. 2 games under 500 when they're not out there. As far as the Rams and Seahawks, look, I can't cast aspersions just the Seahawks' direction. The Rams haven't been much better when it comes to their EPA against the run. These are two of the worst teams in that particular department. But Payne, this number ping-ponging all over the place and the big injury that everyone is following, not just from a betting standpoint, but the fantasy community as well. The overall availability of Seattle's most electric and dynamic offensive weapon. DK Metcalf missed last week against the Bills. Coach McDonald said he's optimistic that number 14 will be out there on Sunday.
Milo is clamoring for the dog here, huh?
You have supersonic hearing because the mic doesn't pick that up, and that's probably half the upstairs of my house away with him chomping on his squeaky toy.
Can't see anymore, but yeah.
You're like Costanza over there.
Well.
Yeah. You make me blind. You squint, you get to 20/20 vision, and all of your other senses improve as a result.
Spotting those raccoons. I didn't have the heart to tell you they were mailboxes. We talked Monday.
I think she was making out with Jeffrey.
We talked Monday about this matchup because the line movement was so drastic from a look ahead to current market, and we probably went into more depth than usual on this game in that segment, more than probably any team or game we've covered since we were doing that look ahead segment. But the overarching thought was even priors from this season in regards to the Rams offense probably belong in the trash bin. And when you get Cooper Kupp and Puka and Kyron back together, we saw Stafford with those weapons last week deliver the best drop back success rate numbers of his season at 61.5%. And if you go back from the onset of last season and incorporate a little bit of this year as well and only pull data from the games where these four gentlemen played together, it's Kupp, Kyron, Puka, and Stafford, their EPA number with McVay pulling the strings has been number one in the league, averaging slightly more than 20% of a point every time they snap the ball on offense. And yes, McVay has owned the Seahawks, and people will think, well, hey, new defensive coordinator, new defensive scheme. Yes, but McVay and the Rams went into Baltimore last season when Mike McDonald was running the number one ranked Ravens defense and torched him. Now, they fell short in overtime, But offensively, the Rams had success. The run game concepts really gave McDonald's defense trouble to the tune of a 55% rushing success rate. Down, the throw game wasn't elite, but there were gobs of explosives, especially off play action. And, that's something we've seen McVay ask Stafford to do more this season is throw with play action. Play action rate is up 6% year over year for Stafford, and Seattle is bottom 5 in the NFL defending play action passes, whether it's EPA, whether it's success rate. You don't need the run game to use play action. We've kind of pounded the table at that fact, but play action can certainly be enhanced if the ground game is going well. And Seattle hasn't stopped the run recently with some of those defensive line injuries. Teams have been running wild on the Seahawks the last 5 games. Now, the Seahawks are a touch healthier heading into this compared to, the game at Detroit or hosting the Giants. They got Reek Woolen back last week. Trey Brown returned as well. We'll have to keep an eye on Devon Witherspoon's foot injury, mispracticed yesterday. Now, he hasn't been as effective in the new complex scheme compared to Pete's last year that just asked you to kind of read, react, and go hunt. But you'd certainly want Witherspoon out there for this matchup if you're a Seahawks bettor or fan. Mike McDonald quietly traded for Ernest Jones last week. He wanted a different look at linebacker, but he also wanted the former Rams green dot to, I think, help with upcoming division games here against the Rams.
Doesn't hurt.
So, does that pay dividends or is it more narrative? We'll see. But certainly, Ernest Jones is familiar with this Rams offense. On paper, just a really tough matchup for the Seahawks defense. The problem is, the price right now, and that's the convo we had Monday, right? Unless DK Metcalf is ruled out, we're not getting to 3. And the places that tried to go to 2.5 on this game have already been sent back. And the best investments are when price and matchup meet. The Seahawks also look to be getting their right tackle situation solved. Abraham Lucas and George Fant return to practice, so that would be massive for that offense. And Geno Smith specifically, especially when you look at Jared Verse right now. I mean, he's just dominating, right? It's a pressure rate over 20% now in the season, second best mark of any defensive end. This is one of the best games on the board, super impactful for the NFC West race. I'm kind of waiting here, Todd. Let's see what the market does if and when DK Metcalf gets announced in. Mike McDonald says he's going to play, even though he sat out practice yesterday. I think he'll be at practice today. There could be a situation where, at least on the screen, DK Metcalf gets announced in this trend, and maybe Abraham Lucas, George Fant, or both get announced in as well, and this gets back down to pick, which is a little bit more digestible price, I think, if you're looking to back the Rams.
Interesting part of the weather forecast. Rain pretty much every day over the next 5 days in Seattle, but it looks relatively clean on game day. One final thing before we close the book on this game, Payne, and not necessarily how it pertains to the matchup against the Rams defense, but your overarching sentiment on what you've seen from Seattle in terms of their offensive philosophy. You mentioned the O-line injuries and the injury to DK Metcalf, but have you liked what you've seen from Ryan Grubb, or do you think this has been necessitated by those injuries, and that's why they've become one of the most pass-happy offenses in the league?
That's a good question. Clearly, you'd like to have a better offensive line in front of Geno Smith, and that's why Geno has been, when you parse through some of the data, he's been electric this season, handling that pressure extremely well. Kenneth Walker has, had some uneven performances because of the offensive line. Ideally, when you go back to Washington, the Washington Huskies at the college level, Grubbs wanted to push the ball downfield more. We've seen DK Metcalf be a little bit more animated because he hasn't been throwing the ball as deep down the field as I think is initially expected. You want the offensive line healthy, right? And you have some nice weapons there in terms of pass catchers when DK is healthy. Kenneth Walker out of the backfield catching balls is a super dynamic player. I don't think we've seen everything from Ryan Grubb's offense quite yet. This is certainly a position as well that he's been thrust into, and he's still kind of learning on the fly here. it has not looked as good as I initially envisioned. I'll just be candid there. But I think there's the ability for growth. Listen, this is the first time the guy's doing this in the NFL, right? There's going to be an acclimation period. It is clearly better in my mind than what was transpiring there before. And then you just have guys like, we talk about this all the time. It's a brand new system. It is like dramatically different than last year. To implement these systems and to get it humming, you typically see around that like week 8, 9, 10 mark is when things start to come together. Is that the case here? I don't know. Because you do have a Rams defense that I think is trending a little bit better that we've talked about. Those young guys along the defensive line continuing to grow each week, get a little bit healthier in the secondary. So I don't think it's ever going to be a great Rams defense this year. But certainly, they're trending towards, bottom 5 defense, and now I think they're more like an average defense. But specific to Seattle's offense, I think there's an ability now that they're healthier to continue growing with a first-year NFL offensive coordinator.
It'll definitely be an interesting group to see because you love the pass-happy approach. It's fun to watch, but we know the elements can play a role in Seahawks home games as you get deeper into November and December, so you'd like to be able to create a little bit of balance once some of those key cogs return along the offensive line. Before we get into the couple remaining big game breakdowns we have on the docket, I want to remind all of you, our loyal Bet the Board listeners, to be sure to follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And, I start to sound like a broken record as it pertains to the best bets that we've offered up on this show. The results haven't been great, but the results have been outstanding and unblemished as it pertains to the Bet the Board podcast newsletter. The Carolina Panthers team total under 14.5 gets home safely last week. So if you're not subscribing to the newsletter as well as listening to the shows each and every week, you're doing yourself a disservice in terms of rounding out that portfolio, trying to take advantage of all the edges that we can offer up, even if the podcast results have not been up to our normally high standards. Payne, Detroit, Green Bay, marquee game arguably of the entire weekend, and one that's surrounded by nothing but question marks in terms of availability for the pivot under center for the Green Bay Packers. And the market, it's tried to figure it out this exact same way. This game would have been a pick'em, all things being equal. Maybe Detroit a short road favorite in this spot. Jordan Love leaves the game early against the Jaguars with a groin injury. We see this market get as high as 4.5 on Monday. The tune changes around Love. He says he's optimistic. Number starts to trend back towards 3.5 or juice 3s, depending on where you look. Seeing a little bit of under money as well, 47.5, 48, 48.5, depending on which way you want to go in that particular game. And the overarching question before we get into one or the two of the key matchups that you're going to have your eyes on, the market and the way it's responding to the availability or potential absence of Jordan Love. I mean, Malik Willis, full credit to him and the coaching staff in Green Bay. Tennessee pretty much traded him away for a used kicking net, and he has given the Packers stability at the backup position, winning 2 games as a starter and coming in and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat even against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. Jordan Love to Malik Willis. The offense looks different, but how have you found in terms of quantifying the impact of the potential absence for Green Bay's starting quarterback?
Yeah, obviously, massive division game, which is... the headline's been stolen because of Jordan Love and this potential injury. Will he or won't he play? And inherently, because Love and Willis are so drastically different, and what LaFleur does offensively is worlds apart depending on which quarterback is under center, it makes it very difficult to talk about scheme and matchup. The line peaked at Lions -5 when all signs pointed to Malik Willis under center for the Packers. Yesterday, whether it was gamesmanship or reality, and keep in mind, like Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love for multiple weeks pretended like Jordan Love's ability to play was so close, an 11th hour decision. So Green Bay has smartly used some gamesmanship 2 other times this season. But Jordan Love...
They can prepare for 2 quarterbacks with different skill sets, baby.
But Jordan Love was asked, how realistic would it be for him to play this Sunday outside of his locker yesterday? And in the direct response, I think it's realistic. And so, those 4 words have effectively had an impact on the market, and the Lions are down to about a 3.25, let's call it. Aside from the Love injury, there's another element, and that's the potential for weather. So we're talking about a lot of factors here that aren't necessarily directly correlated to scheme or matchup. We're 3 days out, so nothing is concrete. But as we record here Thursday morning, there is a band of weather that's kind of set to plop down around Lambeau between 10 a.m. Sunday morning and kind of continues till about 2 p.m. So, let's keep an eye on that. Could easily arrive early and be done before kick. Could slow down and show up after the game is over. Or it could, be a touch slower and arrive at noon and dump for the entire 4-hour game. So it's weather. Who knows? It's just worth tracking. But
the soggy tundra of Lambeau Field.
But kind of going back to the quarterback situation, if it's Malik Willis, the Lions at least have 2 data points for reference rather than going in cold turkey. That helps some. The run rates over expectation in the Malik Willis starts have been substantial. Josh Jacobs is clearly impacted, right? His volume as a runner increases in that scenario. His volume as a pass catcher decreases. Last season, it would have meant the Packers are absolutely dead because you could not run the ball in Detroit. This season, with the cluster injuries along the defensive line, it's been a little different, right? Detroit's 11th in EPA per rush allowed since Aiden Hutchinson went down. But if you exclude Dallas, who literally cannot run and does not have a back that's recorded a 15-plus yard run this season from the equation, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard all exceeded 115 yards against this Lions defense. So it's not the immovable object it was last season. If it's Jordan Love, the pass rate's going to soar. The pass rate increase from Willis to Love has been more than 26%. Detroit's pass defense has improved metrically this season. Brian Branch took that next step. Trading for Carlton Davis has helped some. He's not elite, but he's a grown-up. He's an adult in the room. And for me, Todd, kind of with all the moving parts here, I've been less about matchup in this specific game and said, if it's Willis, I need X price. If it's Love at less than 100%, I need X price. And that's kind of how I'm handling this one. The spread very much, it's what's interesting, like we're talking about the market here, and maybe I'm way off and someone feels differently about it. The spread very much has Malik Willis more incorporated in it, whereas the total in my mind has more Jordan Love incorporated in it.
Fair assessment for sure.
And if it's Willis, the 48s are going to drop like a rock. Right? That's just the reality. So it's like you look at the spread, I'm like, it's got a touch more Malik Willis in it. The total, a touch more of Jordan Love in it. So it's made it a little bit difficult to assess. And again, we've seen that LaFleur Jordan Love combination be very non-forthright in terms of the expectation and ability to play. And so I think the other factors in his ability to be out there, Todd, are that weather, right? If the weather never shows and you have a clean surface and a quarterback with a groin injury is probably going to be more apt to try to give it a go as opposed to a slick surface, right? And then you think about correct me if I'm wrong, bye week for the Packers next week.
Yeah, which is the one thing that leaves you scratching your head going, I get it's a divisional game,
but you don't want to give a division game away either.
No, you don't, but you also don't want to lose your starting quarterback who also missed time earlier in the year trying to win one game if it means you're going to lose this season.
Right. That's correct. So this is a wait and see. And I think, if you are better, again, it's come down to, we're waiting on price. We're waiting on situation. If it's Malik, we're good at this price. If it's Jordan at less than 100%, we need this price. If it's Jordan at less than 100% and it's a little wet, it's this price. If it's Jordan and it's dry, it's this price. So it's certainly a moving target right now, and we know markets are fluid, and this one certainly is going to have a ton of fluidity left from now until kick.
A couple other things to factor in as well that I think are worth noting for those folks who like to do their own handicapping and take some of the nuggets. This will be the first time all season that the Detroit Lions will play a game outside. I mean, they've played every game in perfect, ideal conditions. You have talked at great lengths about Jared Goff.
That's why we went over 10.5, right? I think it's 3 games outside of a dome all 14
season. 14 to 17 games. 2 games in the division and 1 other for them. need to give credit to the Lions, though. The only team on record, according to some of the researchers that provided me this nugget from CBS, Payne, since at least 1940, with more touchdowns, 25, than incompletions in a 5-game span within a season. So the Lions are humming at a level that, let's just say, is not sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. No greater illustration than what the Lions did last week against the Tennessee Titans. 50 points plus points, 225 yards. It's the fewest yards ever in league history for a team to score 50-plus points in a game. So it puts things in perspective
and that might,
for how that was the outlier.
And that might be the more interesting way to attack this. Yes, Malik Willis has been better than anyone could have expected, including the Titans, who had him under their nose for a year plus, right?
Well, Titans coaching staff past the present leaves a lot to be desired.
You understand what I'm saying, right? In fairness, these are professional coaches. These are professional GMs, right? We don't get everything. We're not touching and seeing these players every single day.
100%.
But, with the Lions offense humming so much, it's like you almost kind of maybe want to wait live. Like if the game is tight, it's going to be more suitable to Malik Willis. Yes, the efficiency metrics throwing the ball have been off the charts, but they really haven't asked him to throw the ball much. And they were in perfect game states as well. And so if the Lions offense comes out here and scores a quick one or somehow goes up 10-0, I don't know if I want Malik Willis chasing either. As much as he seemingly hasn't proved, it's been an ideal situation. So this game's kind of been a clusterfuck for me. I thought I was going to have a little bit more of a opinion on this one. It's kind of just wait and see for me right now with all the moving parts.
Fun game. Weather, divisional matchup.
It could have been a lot better if there was more static situations going on here, right, with the quarterback.
This appears to be the Packers each and every week, and that's before we even mention the injury on the defensive side, where I'm pretty much convinced at this point that Jair Alexander is a 50-50 at best proposition to be out there and playing with a lower body ailment that remains as mysterious as anything else. The one thing for Packers fans, Josh Jacobs has said that he believes he'll be out there, so I know he was a DNP on Wednesday, but I fully expect him to be the bell cow back he's been, providing that level of stabilization for Green Bay to try and create some balance. Finally, Sunday Night Football, and I know Bears fans going, wait a second, you're going to talk about all 3 teams in the NFC North, and the Bears aren't going to be included. Well, Bears fans, if your head coach could execute in late-game situations, there's a better chance that the Bears and Commanders would have made the big game breakdown for this particular spot, or Bears and Cardinals, excuse me. Vikings and Colts, Sunday Night Football. We've seen all sorts of money impact this one, Payne, with a storyline that continues to brew. Minnesota, a 5.5 point favorite, total of 46.5 at US Bank Stadium. The big news around this game earlier this week, Shane Steichen saying there will be a change at quarterback, and it's not just for one game, but it could be for the foreseeable future. Fossil Flacco taking over for Anthony Richardson, who couldn't complete a pass other than throwing the ball 7 yards downfield into the dirt. And Vikings and Colts fans both remember the last time these two teams played, it was the Vikings pulling off the largest comeback win in NFL history after trailing 33-0 on a Saturday, end up winning that game 39-6. For the Vikings, we talked at great lengths early in the season how good this team had been in terms of playing with a lead. They've trailed for more than 50 minutes in their last 2 games, gone 0-2. Compared to trailing for a grand total of 3 minutes and 26 seconds in their first 5 games where they went 5-0. Meanwhile, for the Colts, first team in NFL history to have each of their first 8 games decided by 6 points or less. They're the 3rd team in NFL history to have 10 straight games decided by 6 points or less, joining the Cowboys in 2010 and 2011, and a team we all remember extremely well, the Cleveland Bulldogs in 1925 to 1927. Colts just 1-3 on the road this season, but last 3 games have all been decided by 3 points. Joe Flacco, upgrade over Anthony Richardson. Payne, Colts defense trending in the right direction. Vikings, extra time to prepare after losing to the Rams on the short week, headed out to the West Coast. So many different storylines, so many different handicapping elements to try and factor into the equation this week. Which one are you most intrigued to see, and what's caught your eye in this game, given the market movement that we've seen?
There's been a battle. So early money on the Colts from bettors playing the asymmetric risk game, in that if it's Flacco, and based on Shane Steichen's comments, there was a 50-50 chance of that, then the line can't be 6.5. Once we got to 5, there was a bye from one smaller group on the Vikings. Interested to see where this goes from here, but boy, the couple things that are the driving force for this battle, I'll lay out, and it'll help determine a lot of folks' thought processes. But the first one is clearly the Vikings defense, right? What is your belief, right? Are the last 2 weeks noise or signal? And I'm kind of on the side of noise. I think it's fair to say the Vikings don't have the number one defense in the NFL, despite some very respected and all-encompassing data saying they are. But the Vikings defense, to me, is still damn good. They've played one of the toughest schedules of opposing offenses in the league. I believe it's fourth toughest to this point. In the last 2 weeks where the Vikings have been exposed some, it was by an elite Detroit offense who's familiar with Brian Flores and has the parts to combat what Brian Flores wants to do. The Lions O-line has the ability to protect. It has guys that can take on multiple guys and combat the blitzes. They have the speed and quickness at receiver to win early and win downfield against slower, guys in that Viking secondary. We talked about the Rams earlier. When that foursome of Kupp, Kyron, Puka, and Stafford are on the field, it's been the number one offense in EPA per play the last 2 seasons. That's what the Vikings had to face on a short week Thursday night game traveling to a different time zone. And there wasn't a lot of data on what the Rams were going to be this season with those guys. Puka was a surprise, right? And I think the Rams did a fantastic job living in standard downs to where Flores' blitz wasn't as effective, right? And that's kind of the key. We've seen teams be able to run a little bit more on Minnesota. When Minnesota's stopping the run on early down, suddenly you're in those known passing situations on third down. That blitz is wildly more impactful. And that'll be interesting here because when you think about Jonathan Taylor, he's been a more efficient runner with Anthony Richardson in the game. He has not been as effective as a runner with Joe Flacco in the game. So there could be more situations there where those early down runs aren't as impactful, and Flacco's going to be in situations where it's a little bit longer distances on third down. So if you believe the Vikings defense is a fraud, you're gonna lean towards the Colts here. If you believe, hey, maybe not the number one defense, but still a damn good defense that's faced a brutal schedule and been in terrible spots the last 2 weeks, this is a nice bounce back spot off a mini bye, playing in one of the most valuable environments. You'll like Minnesota at a little bit of a depressed price. Now, Joe Flacco's an upgrade over AR, right? He was an upgrade over Watson. And yes, he can sling the ball. He can run an offense. He understands where pressure's coming from. He can get the ball out on time. He can...
Oh no, there's a butt coming here.
He can... No, I mean, he can throw the ball a country mile. But he's probably still an average quarterback to slightly below average, right?
That's for sure.
We've kind of forgot that Joe Flacco was out of the league for 20 months. And so, yes, upgrade over those two gentlemen. But, going out there and, crowning him, he still hung 20 points at Tennessee. It wasn't like this enormous offensive output. We saw with him in the game day steam came in on that Colts-Titans game, and we were like, Jesus Christ, how is that possible? And it won easily. Josh Downs has been the biggest beneficiary of Joe Flacco being in the game, 28% target rate. He just knows how to get open. The other driving force to this battle is Sam Darnold coming back to life, and how improved is the Colts defense now that they're healthier. And I think there is wildly different viewpoints on this. Sam Darnold was never going to be elite, but Kevin O'Connell was going to get the most out of him. We saw what Kevin O'Connell did with dregs at quarterback last season.
How dare you call Nick Mullins a dreg?
And Sam Darnold's splits, when pressured versus kept clean, are some of the most drastic in the NFL. It's one of the largest deltas among qualifying quarterbacks. And so the loss of Christian Darrisaw at left tackle is massive. And yes, the Colts have been better getting pressure the last few weeks. But even if you incorporate last week's performance, Still 23rd in pass rush win rate for the Colts. And now the Vikings go out and they trade for Cam Robinson. So there isn't going to be a pylon at left tackle. So
they also do get TJ Hawkinson back.
Correct. So this is like really an interesting part of the conversation because, you know, everyone that's clamoring for the Colts defense to be improved because of health, I don't disagree, right? No doubt DeForest Buckner's massive. Kenny Moore back in the secondary is massive. It helps. At the same time, we got like 2 years of data with this Colts defense with the same key cogs and the same defensive coordinator for multiple years now, and they've never been like, right? It's 20th in defensive efficiency, schedule adjusted last year. It's 17th in 2022. It's 19th currently. Like, how outside the realm of what they're currently doing is feasible, right? It's been like 3 years of these same key cogs, same defensive coordinator. Like, what's the peak for the Colts defense, right? They got pressure last week. Everyone's gotten pressure against the Texans. It wasn't just because of health. So I'm interested to see what this looks like because I do think the Colts defense can be a little bit better. They have some young parts that are continuing to grow. So if you said, hey, you know, now that they're fully healthy and the young parts have grown up a little bit, you know, this is an above average defense. Okay. But like, how much of a massive improvement is that when we've kind of seen what the Colts have been with these key cogs and the same defensive coordinator for 2 years now?
I'm not going to lie, by the way. I had no idea breaking this game down because it tells you how rarely I look at standings throughout the course of the season that the Colts were a 500 football team. I knew they were good from an ATS perspective. Had no idea that they were actually 4-4 straight up.
It could have been 5-3 last week with a big division win against the Texans had they started the right quarterback. Now, again...
Oh, for sure. And they wouldn't be staring down 2+ games with the tiebreaker, and it's why the Colts are 12-1 to win the division.
Yeah. Now, again, like Flacco is a massive upgrade. What is he here? You know, Josh Downs is going to be impactful because he's the one speed guy. Pittman can certainly be fine, but a little bit more plotting. But this game to me is it's really interesting, and there is just going to be a battle here because the viewpoints are just wildly different. I'm not getting out there and laying it at this price point, especially on Sunday night with every Tom, Dick, and Harry. But, you know, we get to a price here that might be a little nutty. I'm going to be intrigued just because I don't necessarily think Sam Darnold's going to completely turn into a pumpkin here.
Well, I like the reference. It is the right day to turn into pumpkin, so job well done out of you.
I did not realize it is. Holy shit, today's Halloween, isn't it? Yeah, I mean this life, man.
It doesn't afford a whole lot of luxuries outside of the narrow purview.
Yeah.
It's basically Groundhog Day all over again.
Yep.
The numbers change, the teams, the matchups change, but the day-to-day process does not change.
Yeah. So I'm just from a price perspective. I don't know how much lower we can get here, especially with a great coaching staff that has extra time to prepare off a mini bye. So, I think it made sense to number grab the Colts with the idea that Joe Flacco is there. I just think it becomes a little bit different of an assessment. Now that we're a little bit lower, and God forbid this got the 4, and we know Cam Robinson is there, and you know, as you mentioned, Hawkinson back up. We'll kind of hear what his ability is.
They claim no snap count. We've heard that before.
Yeah, I saw that. So
we've heard that before.
I don't think this is as large of a slam dunk as initially anticipated. I know that the Colts have been monsters ATS, but again, you know,
in the league.
What does it look like if the Texans, who are very much having struggles on offense, don't fumble inside the 10 with 3 minutes to go last week?
It changes. It changes things substantially in terms of the way this game shapes up and everything else in play. Total ticked up from 45. We talked on Monday to 46.5. We do see a prominent book at 47 as well.
Very interesting there. We can kind of go into it. When we ran the initial numbers, they were with AR in mind on Sunday night, and it was with a pylon at left tackle for for the Vikings, and the number spit out oddly low, like 43.2 for us, and the market was 45.5. But then, you wake up Monday morning, you start doing a little bit more due diligence. You're like, holy shit, it's probably a greater than 50-50 chance that Flacco's going to be under center. And so with that adjustment up, we thought 46.1 was then the right number, and the market was like 45.5. And inherently, we just, there's not enough value there. There's not enough numbers of impact there to go. So, but it doesn't shock me. We're now at 46.5 and even 47 some places. And now they've added Cam Robinson and Hawk is up. So my instinct here is that we see a much better version of the Vikings defense this week relative to the last two.
That would make a world of sense for a group that trended up and has shown exceptionally well for multiple weeks so far this season. That with extra time to prepare, a couple of wrinkles in there for a quarterback that doesn't offer the threat of mobility, that the Vikings can make him a sitting duck. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly for the podcast, be sure to follow Bet the Board at Bet the Board Pod. Best bet portion of the program, kind sir. I have an inkling in terms of where we are going, but I will give you the honors.
So, yeah, we don't usually like doing this, but at this stage in the game, the fly-by-night listeners have probably been long gone at this point. So, let's go to Thursday night. This is the one game that you and I both have substantial positions on. There's been some other small ones, but this is the one. And let's look to the New York Jets here. Now, mechanically, you kind of outline this, right? You have a 6-2 team versus a 2-6 team. It's prime time. I don't really get caught up in the publics on this, pros are on this stuff, right? It's a market, but inherently this does have a little bit of a Super Bowl element to it, where the public's going to come in and they're going to put down their $20 and they're going to want to take Houston on the money line. And so it's created a little bit of an imbalance here, as I would say the consensus number is Jets 2 flat. There is some 1.5 out there, but at 2 flat, the correlated money line price probably closer to like minus 135, and you can get 127 at Circa with flush game day limits. You can do the same at Pinnacle. I believe they're at 128 right now. So let's go with the Jets money line here. The other large and in charge forward-facing sports book at $1.25. So let's go with the Jets on the money line here. We broke this game down a little bit earlier in the show. It's time-stamped above. You have our thoughts on there, so no need to reiterate those now. Let's get off to Schneid here. A little Thursday night football.
Let's do it. What could be better than backing Aaron Rodgers and the Jets to turn their season around on Thursday night football? Rip the Band-Aid off early this week. And get that first best bet podcast winner for the NFL season between the Jets and Texans. Anything else that you would like to impart wisdom-wise on our loyal listenership?
Yes. We got to get off the Schneid. That's the key here. We don't make excuses. 0-8.
Nope.
Not good enough. It's taken season 11 to have the trolls out in full force. But what I will say, I saw one in the comments. Someone said, we're at the halfway point of the season. They still haven't won yet. It's a 22-week NFL season when you incorporate the playoffs. 2, something we've said even when we're on winning streaks is the streaks seem to last a little bit longer because we're only doing one. This is 0-8. It's an irrelevant 8-game sample size. I did not look. I probably should have looked. My vibe here at last check, we were beating the market on these games by more than 2 points per game, if you can believe that. And this is the information that we're going to the well with large amounts of money. The market is still respecting our opinion because the odds makers understand the value that we provide, even though you may not enjoy it or enjoy the outcomes of these things. But again, even last week, right? All you can ask is getting your money in at basically 3 minus
20.
3 minus 20, it closes 5 on game day. So,
yep. With double-digit leads to boot.
2 in the second half. So, the variance has not been kind. But again, we're not making excuses. I think what we're trying to kind of instill in a lot of bettors who have grown up recently on the I don't know what a rotation number is, same game parlay, birthing into this space. You can be 0-5 and give out the Jaguars plus 2.5 and see it close -2 and have one of the most respected bettors in the world taking a worse number than the one you gave out for the audience. Again, last week, another group came in after the fact, about 4 hours after this podcast went live, and played the Dolphins as well. And listen, I go back and that game just chaps my ass because 4 hours after we give it out, their key cog along the defensive line, and Zach Seiler gets randomly poked in the eye at practice and does not play in that game. And the ultimate chess piece on the board for Anthony Weaver's defense and Javon Holland is removed after the first quarter with a knee injury, and you get a non-offensive score for Arizona. And if you look at the range of production from Kyler Murray, that was his best performance and close to his career. And suddenly Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler got on the same page for the first time of the season. So it's been wildly frustrating. Anything that could go wrong has, and hopefully the ship gets righted this week. And our goal, and certainly providing the newsletter, is to create more sample size and lessen the variance. So one aspect of what we've done is 8-0, the other one is 0-8, and that's probably the perfect depiction of the word variance. So we get off the schneid tonight with the New York Jets. Let's go.
Yeah, it ain't for a lack of work around these parts. So we appreciate all the loyal listeners that have been with us since the podcast started, and the ones that'll continue to take value from the information, even if the best bets haven't performed to our extremely high standards around here. We don't hide behind it. As Payne said, we continue to plow through, and we will get this thing turned around as early as tonight with the New York Jets on the money line. All right, my friend, I think we've done enough damage. We get a little break from one another until we get to come back on Monday, talk about your beloved Kansas City Chiefs as more than a touchdown favorite against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in prime time, recap all the things we have seen, and most importantly, celebrate a New York Jets best bet winner on Thursday night to send us into the weekend on a high note.
Old Vici making moves.
I mean, trying to do things, but I figured he would have tried to make at least a play for Deontay Johnson in some capacity.
Another receiver?
That receiving room.
Another one?
I mean, just keep loading up. Keep loading up. Give Patty Mahomes some weapons to operate with.
Got a pressure guy there, and Josh Uche off the scrap heap. Don't let him return to his 2022 form with the...
Where's Charles Omenihu stand, by the way, in his return from?
I don't think we're quite there yet. I would say somewhere in the teens would be a return.
Gotcha.
Just ramp him up. Give him 4 or 5 weeks
to rush him
get
back.
rolling.
As long as he's in game shape for Week 18, get a couple live bullets and be ready for the Kansas City Chiefs playoff run.
The Uche, Omenihu, Chris Jones, Karlaftis foursome pressure rate and known passing downs. That could be interesting. Ooh.
Changes things quite a bit for that team to be able to generate pressure. All right, it's Halloween. I'm going to let you go load up on all the candy. All the candy.
What are you doing?
All the
Are
candy corn, the almond joy. Oh yeah, we hand out.
Okay.
We're good about that.
You better not be recycling popcorn. I've heard some rumors.
No. No, we will not be recycling popcorn. We don't go full candy bars because we have such a volume of kids that are around here, and actually have a very nice Halloween-themed dinner planned with our mutual friend along with his lovely daughter later this evening.
TB
will be making an appearance in the hood.
I spoke to him yesterday. Well, he called me out of the blue.
He called me right now during the podcast.
Did he?
So.
Okay,
yeah,
so him and his daughter are coming over.
Yeah,
what are you cooking?
Family appearance. So,
what are you cooking there?
I mean, it's not on me. It's on my mom, who's putting the whole elaborate shindig together.
It's the whole thing. Okay, well, first of all, we got good vibes. So you got like the ultimate Jets fan in the house. You got a little family environment going on.
Yeah, which now that I think about this out loud, it can go horribly wrong or it can go extremely well. It can be a Nightmare on Elm Street type scenario if the Jets don't put together a good first half for all parties involved.
I've watched a Knicks game with Bloss. He's a positive vibe. I think we're in good shape now that you tell me he's going to be at your house for dinner. Okay.
All right.
I feel better about this.
the things we throw out. So the
12
invitation
positions on the Jets. No, I'm kidding.
The invitation stands if you want to join us. You jump on a flight in the next 45 minutes. Yeah. You can be out here just in time for the second half.
Me and Aaron Boone apparently were, as he said, hopping on the bird to go west. Unfortunately, the Yankees are not heading west.
No, they are not, and hopefully Aaron Boone doesn't get back.
What a fucking disaster that was. All right, let's get out of here.
All right. For all the listeners, again, thanks as always for tuning in. Remember, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast as much, and keep spreading Bet the Board as far and wide as you possibly can. Most importantly, though, as we head into Week 9 with a Jets ticket in that portfolio, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Furman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.